Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the lecture on salutary neglect from 1607 to 1763. So the essay prompt here is define and discuss, while providing examples of salutary neglect. Be prepared to discuss its significance in American history. Also, discuss the Treaty of Paris of 1763 and show how and why this treaty had a profound impact on salutary neglect, and hence the relationship between England and its colonies. So before we get started with learning Objective 1, there's one thing I wanted to point out, is that there's a lot of things that we could say about the founding of each colony, when it was founded, what type of people found the colony, why it was founded, the 13 original colonies, the differences between the colonies, the middle colonies, the northern colonies, the southern colonies. But the one thing that we can point to about all of the colonies is this degree of salutary neglect. Now, this lecture series will draw out what salutary neglect is, as far as in the context of U.S. history, so pay close attention to that. But this is the running theme of colonial history as far as the relationship between England and its colonies. So a great example, probably the most prominent example of salutary neglect, is the founding of the New England colonies, beginning with the settlement of the Puritans. So learning Objective 1 is discuss the background and development of Puritanism, basically the introduction material. This is introduction material from 1620 to 1686. Now, take note of those years. Those years are important. That's why they're there. So 1620 to 1686 will, through this discussion and learning Objective 1, we will have a better understanding of why those years are of significance. So, to be a Puritan in the 16th and 17th century was not a simple, clear-cut thing. There was no formal organization, no political party, not even a church called the Puritan Church. Right? It was a social movement that was clearly defined and often underground and even revolutionary. In many ways, it was a movement aimed at recovering a lost way of life, communal values. It was basically a movement of early an early protest movement of the rising capitalist system. To some degree, they were as commercial values were taking over within England. There was this idea that communal life, having land on the commons, having a common goal of the community, was being lost in this enterprise of capitalism, of gaining colonies, and of moving and of using a church for cynical purposes, that is, to buttress state power. The leaders of the movement almost never used the term Puritan. In fact, it was more of a derogatory term of its critics. Puritanism originated in England in the mid-1500s when a group of religious reformers sought to, purify the Church of England of bishops, church courts, and other remnants of Catholicism. The English crown, which under King Henry VIII had renounced Catholicism. This guy right here, if you've ever seen the miniseries The Tudors, that's what this guy was all about. What the King Henry was all about. He renounced the Catholic Church and replaced it with the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. It retained many aspects of the Roman Catholic theology and ceremony, which is what later Puritans are going to revolt against. They are wanting the Anglican Church to really become its own church in custom and practice. During Queen Elizabeth's reign, during 1558 and 1603, which has been more than one movie made about her that are all pretty good, a noticeable trend toward Protestant doctrine and ceremony developed. And by the time King James I's reign, 1603 to 1625, which I don't think there's been anything made about this guy. So if movie makers, TV makers out there, here's your chance to bring something original to the screen. When he came to the throne, 1603 to 1625, some Englishmen were content with the Anglican Church as it was. Others hoped to reintroduce much of the ritual and some of the tenets of Catholicism, although they had no desire to return to papal control. And still others took an extreme Protestant position. The extreme Protestants were called Puritans because they wanted to purify the Anglican Church still further. With official Anglican doctrine, the Puritans had no quarrel, but they wished to do away with bishops, deans, and all clergy above the ranks of parish priests, to abolish set prayers, and to reorganize the church either by a hierarchy of councils, which would have been the Presbyterians. So the Presbyterians wanted to have some sort of hierarchy still, like the Catholic Church, just to a lesser degree, or on the basis of a free federation of independent parishes, the Congregationalists, which were taking even a more extreme view of purifying the Anglican Church. The Puritans were mostly members of the urban middle class, engaged in trade and commerce. They resented James's arbitrary and illegal taxation and wanted to secure laws for the protection and expansion of English commercial interests. Puritans all agreed on what was wrong with the Anglican Church, but they disagreed on how to make it right. They all relied on the Bible for guidance, and they all extracted different opinions from it about how God wanted the church to be run, just like any religious community. Consequently, by the late 1500s, early 1600s, Puritanism was divided into three main groups. Again, the Presbyterians. So the Presbyterians, as mentioned, they wanted central authority of a hierarchy of councils and accepted all corners into the faith. They made no distinction between visible saints and inhabitants, as did the Congregationalists. The Congregationalists were organized into independent parishes, which each congregation governing itself, but with a state-supported religion, and was made up of only quote-unquote true believers or visible saints versus inhabitants, meaning just people who can casually come and go. The Congregationalists wanted to purify the church from within, but later established the colony of Massachusetts, which we'll talk about later, for religious reasons, as internal improvements were found to be impossible in the Old World. The Separatists, the most radical group, so this is the third group, they felt the church could not be purified from within, and to support such a corrupt institution was like shaking hands with the devil. Thus, they wanted to separate and form their own church. The Separatists also felt that each congregation had the right to completely govern itself, and thus rejected the idea of a state-imposed religion. They were an early advocators of separation of church and state. So the Separatists, they're part of the Congregationalists, but they are an extreme version of the Puritan movement. And although the Separatists were the smallest group within the Puritan movement, they were considered the most dangerous by the crowd because they were the most radical, and because they were considered the most dangerous and radical. England, church authorities, society itself is going to get pretty hostile to the Separatists, the radical wing of the Congregationalists within the Puritan movement.